Hey, everybody. Today we're going to talk a little bit about some theories that surround communication, the communication discipline, some that we started out with, some that we've moved to. One of the things about communication and communication theory is that not all experts agree the same. Sometimes there's slight changes in what people believe. So we're going to go over a couple different models of communication. We're going to talk about the linear model of communication, the interaction model of communication, and then finally the transactional model of communication. So the linear model of communication was created in 1948 by Claude Shannon and Warren Weaver. They worked for a place called Bell Laboratories, which later became Pacific Bell, which later became AT&T. And I think now there's one that's called Nikon Bell Laboratories in Michigan. So they've been around a long time and had a lot of different iterations. But basically, they were one of the first telephone companies. And the company came to them and said, hey, we really want to better understand this new technology we have, this new telephone. So, can you make a model? Can you make a theory about it? And they came up with a linear model of communication. And basically, what it says is that there's a source, me, and I'm giving you information, and you're on the other side and you're receiving it. Oh, and maybe you'll send something back to me, and then I'll send something back to you, and so on and so forth. But it's a very simple communication model. Just imagining the source and the receiver, source and receiver. That's it. But that doesn't really seem like that's enough. And in fact, it feels a little bit kind of like, I don't know, maybe watching television. How often are you? I know I'm really guilty of this. You're doing some menial household chore and you put the television on in the background and it just plays. That's your source. It doesn't care if you understand it. It doesn't care if you're in the room. It doesn't care if you even have it on the right language. It's just going to play. It's just going to give you that source. And so a couple of years later, they came out with the interaction model of communication. And this was much more extensive of a model. And basically, what it said the speaker, in this case, the man in yellow, creates a message by encoding the message. So, for example, right now, I'm encoding it into English. I might be encoding it into American Sign Language or into Spanish or into Farsi. I could be encoding it into Morse code, right? And then I have to get it across layers of noise that must be overcome. That noise could be literal noise, like if where you are right now is really loud, then you might have to turn up the volume to kind of overcome and hear that noise. And that's really on your side. On my side, if the animals are barking and meowing and there's garbage trucks in the background, that might be the noise that I have to overcome. It goes across a channel. And now the channel, one of the channels I'm using is just my voice, right? But it could also be the computer mediated, right? And it gets across your noise on your side, and then you're decoding it. So you have to take all the words that I'm saying and you decode it and you better understand it. And then you do the same thing back. And this is a much more involved and sophisticated idea of communication, but it still lacks something. In fact, it kind of feels a little bit more like a text message, right? Because a text message, you've got those very purposeful movements. I pick up my cell phone. I put my message in my cell phone. I put it into English. I have to get across, let's just say, bad signal, right? I don't have Wi-Fi where I am. The message itself is sent through this signal in the air and the Wi-Fi or whatever else. You have to get it through across your noise. Maybe you didn't hear the little text message ping, right? Or you're in a deep conversation with your significant other and you don't want to be seen picking up your cell phone in the middle of it. Am I right? So when you finally get a chance to look at it, you have to decode what's going on or what's your mother thinks is going on and then respond, right? But it feels so much less, well, instantaneous because that's what communication is, right? It's this very quick hell. Let's really say it. Sometimes you can look at somebody and know what they're thinking, right? And that's really where we come to this transactional model of communication. And the transactional model of communication is going to look like at things like the physical and the psychological context, the social context, the cultural, the relational. And basically, what it's saying is that we have shared meanings which we process simultaneously. We create these meanings, we interpret them, and we negotiate them. They're symbolic, they're personal, and it's an absolute transactional. It's back and forth process. So let's kind of break this down a little bit more. The same processes do occur. Primary sender right here, right? I'm communicating, and it's a little bit harder in this mediated, but if I was in a classroom, I'd be decoding these messages from you. So I might have a student who's yawning, right? Or I call them the WTF lines, is looking at me like I'm crazy, or even just raising their hands, right? I'm taking all of those messages and I'm decoding them from you. You all, as receivers, are analyzing my messages, but also simultaneously responding to me in subtle ways, open eyes, nodding, smiling, or looking at your phone, right? The location of communication is also going to make a difference. Do we communicate the same, well, in church or temple or synagogue as we do at a nightclub, right? Do we talk the same way to our parents as we do our best friend or a significant other, right? Do we getting a phone call right now? Do we have a little bit noise on a telephone call? Absolutely. This stuff happens all the time, right? And I to get back to my point, there's events in relationships. So your mom, you're not going to talk to your mom the same way you talk to your little sister. Am I right? And then there's other things like appearance. Somebody walks into somebody walks into your job, somebody walks into Tesla while you're sitting over there and they're in a suit and a tie versus somebody walks in who's in overalls. It's going to make a difference on how you treat them, right? It's going to make a difference on how you talk to them or how you listen to them. All language is symbolic, and I think that's so important to understand, and the transactional model really gets into it. All of these symbols, well, almost all these symbols, you probably understand, right? We've got the original emoji over there. Let me see if I can get out of the way so you can see. This one is the Nike swoop, right? We've got a smiling emoji. We got the eggplant emoji. And then we've got an ancient letter called thorn. And of course, we have up at the top SYMBOLS. Well, why do we think a colon, a dash, and half a parentheses is a smiley face? Because we as a society have decided it so. I have the eggplant emoji because even though that is very clearly an eggplant emoji, it has a very clear second meaning in text messages, right? And then the thorn is an interesting one because that was a symbol that at one point in time we recognized as the sound TH. So we used to not write TH, we used to write the thorn symbol. But over time, we stopped understanding that and we no longer have that shared meaning. So all of these have shared meanings that we understand because we've decided it's so. That's literally the only reason, which is funny. To get back to that interference or noise, any sort of noise is just anything that's going to like interrupt the transmission. Okay. It can result in misinterpretation and it occurs in all acts of communication. So there's a lot of different types of noise, such as semantic noise. And this is literally just failure to understand the word. If I were to use jargon, like either communication or Navy jargon, because I am in the Navy, you might be like, I don't know what that word means. If I were to use Japanese in this class, in this portion, and you're like, I don't speak Japanese, that's semantic noise. Here's another great example of semantic noise. Let's check it out.
CBS 2's Serene Branson is live at the Staples Center with highlights and backstage coverage we're seeing for the very first time. Serene.
Well, a very, very heavy debatation tonight. We had a very Darrison fight. Let's go to Terrace and look for the head of the pit.
And the Grammy.
So what the hell did she just say? Nobody knows, right? Because we did not understand the word. But the funny thing is, she actually had a physiological noise. What happened later, we found out, no, it wasn't a stroke. It was actually a migraine so bad that it interrupted the encoding process in her head. She thought she was speaking English. She thought she was fine, but her migraine was so intense, it just completely garbled it. So for her, it was a physical illness. And think about it. The last time you were sick, how well did you communicate, right? There could be psychological noise. Think about it this way. The last time you were really angry, did you communicate well? Because I know I didn't. There could be intellectual noise. I always find this true, and I bet a lot of you dealt with this last week, is when you go through like in doc or orientation, they give you so much information. At the end, you're like, I remember like 2% of that. I have no idea. And that's kind of that information overload, right? Sometimes if you go into a test and you're totally unprepared, suddenly when they ask you for your name, you completely blank. That would be information underload. And then, of course, there's environmental noise, such as a fan going off in the different distance, a cell phone going off. I always like this one, rotting garbage. Consider it. You walking over to talk to your friend and you stop and there's something that smells really bad. You can't concentrate, can you? You move away. So that would be environmental noise. I always love that one. So the next one is feedback. So remember, as I'm talking in traditional classroom, I'm getting feedback from you. It can be both verbal and nonverbal, right? Because it can be a nodding or it can be the WTF lights. And when I'm seeing those things, I'm adjusting my message as necessary. If you all write me after this and say, what the fuck was that video? I could not pay attention at all. I have to take that and adjust my message to make you better understand it, right? So we adjust and we continue with the messages. Here's a lot of different types of feedback that you might see. Here's Stanley from The Office, if you know him. He's kind of saying like, what the hell, right? And of course, as we know, communication is influenced by context, by location, by relationship. So Stanley, even though I see that as he's saying, "Oh, bloody hell, what's now? I'm so annoyed." To somebody else, it might mean something else, and it doesn't make it wrong. We got Troy and Abed over here, kind of going like, "Oh, that's kind of neat, right?" I got Emma Stone down here, and she just looks oh so happy, right? Although I've heard from people this was just her being really sarcastic in the movie. I think it's from Easy A. So all of these things kind of change, but we're still interpreting them and eventually could be changing our message because of them. So the transactional model of communication is symbolic, it's personal, it's going to mean something different to me than it is to you. It's simultaneous and it's transactional, it's back and forth. It's influenced by location, history, cultural, and social relationships. Interference can create communication misinterpretations, and feedback from the receiver affects the sender who adjusts the message as necessary. So here are a couple questions I want you to think about and be ready to answer these on Tuesday. If our language and communication style is based on the context and situation we're in, can our situation be changed by our language? Why or why not? And why, and if yes, what would be the stipulations were no? And if no, what would be the stipulations of yes? And the next one is, can we ever not communicate? And I leave you with this little thing for all of us who have iPhones, and I guess now a lot of Androids too. Can we ever not communicate? So what did we talk about? We talked about why study communication, the linear model of communication, the interaction model of communication, and the transactional model of communication. Thank you so much for your time, y'all, today, and I can't wait to see you next time.